Hello everyone, Dr. Letterman here, and I'm here to show you how to tie an oboe reed. And what you see right here is I have all of the equipment that I need in order to tie the reed. So right here I have my mandrel, which I use in order to hold everything as I'm tying, and I put the staple on to the mandrel. You'll see the staple has cork and then a metal part as well. There are some staples that actually are just simply metal with some rubber around them as well. The main part that's the most important is this right here, which is our piece of cane. And it has been gouged and it has been shaped, so it is ready to be tied. I also have a razor blade, which I use towards the end of the process. And I have beeswax, which helps me with my thread get a little bit more of a grip. And this is the thread, and it comes in many colors and sometimes variegated. This is just a nice kind of brown, tawny color. I also have a C-clamp, which is what I use to tie the thread onto. And my last two things, I do have a ruler that I use throughout the process to make sure that the length and everything is correct. And finally, I do use my knife for a little bit of this process. So let's go ahead and get started. Hello everyone. So we are ready to go ahead and tie. So I have this piece of cane, which has been soaking for about 10 to 15 minutes, and we're gonna get it ready to go onto this staple. So the first thing that I actually do is I grab my knife because I want to scrape the ends of the piece of cane. And this is something that's optional. Not every reed maker will do this, but it can help when you are trying to seal the reed. Some people believe that it helps the seal, but also it makes the just taper of the thread or the wrap look much nicer because there won't be a little shelf as you get to the end of the cane. So I'm just gonna hold it in my hand like this, and I'm just gonna scrape the very end of this bark off so that I have a nice taper on the cane. Very easy to do. And then I'll go to this right here and do the exact same thing on the other side. And now I am ready to get my thread tied onto my C-clamp. So as you see, I've got my thread here and I find the end of it, and I'm going to tie just a few knots into the with the thread onto this C-clamp, and this is going to act as a place that keeps me grounded, and it's not going to move. I've got this C-clamp on there pretty tightly, and you can see I wrapped my thread all the way back up with the lead on top. The lead being on top is very important. So I'm going to grab my beeswax, and again, this is another optional thing that many players do, but it is not required. It's another thing that a lot of people say helps the reed seal, and frankly, the reason I actually like to do it is not necessarily for it to seal, although that's a great benefit, but what I actually am looking for is a nice grip as I'm tying this, because we're tying with nylon thread, and the nylon thread can be really, really slippery in your hands. And so I love using the beeswax on the thread so that I know that I'm going to have a really good solid grip as I'm tying. So now I'm going to grab my staple and my mandrel, and I'm going to place the mandrel or the staple onto the mandrel. And what I'm looking for is that this is completely flush with my mandrel. This is really close, so I'm kind of pushing this in. And what's interesting to note as you're looking at this is that you have an oval. It's not a complete circle, and that oval is very important to make sure that you're aware of. So as you are tying, Most mandrels will have a flat surface, and that is going to line up with the flat part of that oval. So it's very important when you are working on tying that you know how this is set up on your specific mandrel, because every mandrel is different, and sometimes it can be off kilter a little bit. So if it is, you want to know that that is the case. So I am ready to start getting this placed on my mandrel. Now, as I am getting that ready, I'm taking this piece of cane and I want to make sure, I'm gonna let you see this really closely, that I have what we call the slip. So the bottom blade right here is going to show on the left side just a little bit. And so I'm encouraging this slip so that once I get it tied, it will have that as well. Now, if you are a left-handed person and you are tying left-handed, I am a righty, but if you are tying left-handed, you want to make sure that this is completely opposite. So a left-handed slip would be on the right side, okay? But left-handed reed makers can also tie right because you're using both hands. So it's up to you. Definitely experiment because it is going to be a little bit different, but just so you know what to be aware of. Okay, so we're going to get this on our mandrel, and I like to have, of course, this flat side, so the flat side of the oval, and I'm going to just kind of place this cane right over that. And I'm going to hold it down so that I now can check first that I've got a little bit of a overlap on this side, but I'm going to grab my ruler. And I have a Gilbert -1 shape. And so I want to tie this at a total length from bottom of staple to the end of this piece of cane, around 72. I'm okay if it's a little over 72, but I don't want to be more than 73. And I don't want to be really less than 72. 71.5 is okay, but like I said, I prefer it to be 72. And right now I am right at 73. So that's a little more than I want. And I also will note that for me personally, and this is different for everyone, but for me personally, when I am tying, my cane starts to shift down just a little bit. So if I start this just a little over 72, which this is 72 and like a half or a quarter, I know that it's going to end right at 72. So I'm not super exact with this measurement because, again, it's not going to make or break the reed. There is some measurements we'll talk about that will make or break the reed, but this is not one of them. So as you can see, I'm holding with my index and thumb. These are very important fingers as we're tying, so just be aware I'm holding this so that it's not going to move. And as I do that, I'm kind of shifting my fingers, so I'm ready now to grab my thread and get going. So as you're starting, you want to make sure that you can get as close to the C-clamp as possible because you just don't, A, want to waste a lot of thread, and B, once you get further away, it becomes harder to keep this taut. Because as we're tying, we need to have like a high violin E string pitch if someone were to come and pluck this. So the other important thing is that I use my thumb and my index finger to guide this thread. I don't let it just kind of go as it needs to. I have this very tight, and my thumb and my index finger are in charge here. So the first thing I do is I'm placing this, you can see with the side at the top, and I want to tie on or wrap around 3 wraps. So let's do this together. 1, 2, 3. And you can see I'm using my thumb as I wrap around, and all of this is very, very tight on both ends. If it's not, it's going to be a problem as you go through. So notice I've got a pretty large opening here, and it's completely closed on this side. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use my thumb and this index finger, and I'm gonna just kind of wiggle this down. This is the one time you can let go of that tautness so that you can move the cane. You can see I've started to get a little bit of an opening. And so I'm gonna check, and I'm pretty close on both sides, but this is still a little more closed. So I'm gonna wiggle again, and wiggle again, until I'm pretty satisfied with the opening. And it's pretty close, but one thing that you'll notice is now it's pretty, what I would call, off to the right. So now I need to get this back centered. As I do this, it's moving around. And the important thing is what I'm checking right now. You can see I'm kind of squinting. I'm using one eye to make sure that as I look down the mandrel, that it is in line with the flat. So the flat of the reed needs to be in line with the flat of my mandrel. Now, I'm pretty close with my opening, so I'm gonna go with this, and actually I might wanna push this down just a little bit. So there we go, pretty close there. So now the next part is I want to get this closed. So all I'm gonna do is keeping this nice and taut on both ends, but I'm rolling this towards me. And as you see I'm doing this, it starts to close. And as it closes, I'm actually kind of pressing on this. So I'm pushing the bottom blade to the left and pushing the top blade to the right. And as I do that, it encourages that slip. And now I see that I have a reed that's closed. So now I can check the top of my thread. And this is very important because we do not want to over tie. If we over tie, and what that means is it's going over the top of our staple, we will have a reed that doesn't vibrate because the air cannot get into the staple. We also don't want to under tie because then we can have air pockets in between the staple and the cane. So we have to be very, very accurate with where we are ending this tie. So I'm close, it's closed, which means it could be ready to start winding back down. But what I see is that I am at currently 45. Now, not every staple is the same length. It depends on what you have purchased and what you decided on. But the standard is to have a 47 millimeter staple. And so that's what I have. That's what majority of American players play on. So you're looking for 46 and a half. Want it just one wind under the top of the staple. And that kind of is a good point to go for. And on that ruler that I use, those little nubs, the inside of the nub is 46 and a half. So I need to do about 3 more winds or 3 more rolls. And so then I'm going to check once more. And I should be right at 46 and a half, right in the center. So I can go ahead and finish tying this. So as you see right here, I'm going to keep this nice and taut. Remember, I have to have high E string sounds. And I'm going to place my finger right here. So I've got it flat for basically the flat side on top. Placing my finger here, and I'm getting ready to do what we call the crossover. So you can see my thumb is on the thread right here. And I am going to bring this thread over the top, and it's going to stay on the right of the lead, but I can move this reed a little bit this way to get the lead out of the way. So there is my crossover, and what you can't see is that I have a nice crossover going right on the flat side. Once I do the crossover, I am going to roll it once towards me, so now the opposite flat side is on top, and I'm just going to wind one thread next to another all the way down. And as I get to the end of the thread, I am done. And remember, this is tight the whole way. If you don't keep it tight, you're going to have a reed that does not seal. So you want to make sure that you're doing that. So now I am ready to tie this off. So as I am getting ready, I have put my finger here, just like when I was measuring, so that nothing can go anywhere. I'm holding it really tight. You can see the whites of my fingers. That means I'm holding it very, very tightly because I don't want to let it go. This is my spool end, and I'm going to just create a loop. So I've created a loop, just like that, just a simple loop, and I'm going to lasso my reed, and I'm going to pull this down. And as I do that, I now can let go. It's not going to come apart at this point because I have gotten this completely tied. So then I call this my crazy Russian knot. It's only called that because a colleague of when I was a young undergrad taught me this knot, and I like it because it frequently will not come undone. So what you do is I put this now in my right hand, and this is again the spool side of the thread, and I'm going to create another loop just like I did, and I'm going to hold the lead thread, the part that goes to the spool, with my right thumb right on the cork. And with the loop I'm going to go once, twice around, and then I'm going to lasso on the third time. And this is where it gets a little complicated, so you want to pull this, of course, on camera. So you want to once, twice, lasso, and I want to pull this lead thread, keeping the lasso around the reed, and just get it tight down at the bottom. It takes a little bit of maneuvering sometimes, but what this does is it's going to create a knot down here. And so as I get it tight, I have this knot, and that knot is helpful because it has a place now that it's not going to go anywhere. So I'm going to go ahead and cut here, and I leave that little bit so that if it does for some reason start to come undone, you can take your teeth and you can just pull that to the left and get it back to ready. And that is our tied reed. So we'll go ahead and talk now of what to do to make sure that it is a good blank. Okay, so we've just tied our reed, and we want to check to make sure that we are have a good blank. So I'm taking this off the mandrel, and the first thing that I like to do is I like to check and make sure that my overlap is there. And so I'll show this really closely so you can see what I'm talking about. So as you look at this reed, you can see that the bottom blade is just ever so slightly more visible as you are looking at this reed. And so that to me tells me that, okay, this overlap looks pretty darn good, which is a good thing. The other thing that I do, and I'll show this up here, is I like to be able to see that the inside of the reed, so what will be the tip opening, is in line with my my opening itself. And so I know you cannot see this very well in this video. There's a little piece of something in there, actually. But when you are looking at it, you're looking through this part right here and checking, and you'll know. It's very, very clear if it is not in line. So that's your second check. The other kind of check you want to do is just kind of make sure that it's inlined this way, so it looks straight. It's not going this way or this way. And then it's also inlined this way, so it's not going either of those ways. And this is pretty darn straight from what I can tell. So the next thing I am ready to go ahead and do is I'm going to cut off my ears. And so to do that, I place the reed right here. I've got the tip or the end of the reed in kind of like that fatty part of my palm, and I'm gonna place my razor blade completely flat, and I'm just going to grab those ears, that part that is just not the same, not in line with the rest of this. And as I do that, I make it look so much closer to that final reed. All right, and I want to be careful not to take too much. You can see on this side, there's just a little left. So what I tend to do with that is I'll grab either a emery board or sandpaper, whatever I have, and I'm just gonna sand a little bit. I don't want to take too much off, because if I sand too much, I'm going to be changing the shape, and I don't want that. But I do want to kind of even this out on either side, and you can feel as you go along it if it juts out. And right now it's jutting out just a little bit. So I'm just gonna fix that, and this is the other side doing the same sort of thing. And now I have my blank. And the final step is just taking the bark off the very end of this reed. As I do that, I can do my final check, which is to get an idea if it seals. You won't know for sure until you open it and see what the blades want to do as they shift once you've cut open the tip. But you can get a general idea, and if you wanted to retie it, you could at this stage. But once you go beyond that, you cannot really retie. So to check that, I actually put my finger over the end of the tube, and I'm just gonna suck in and listen for my pop. That pop tells me most likely it's gonna seal. If I don't hear that pop, what I can do is I can blow into it, and if I hear some air escaping, it's probably not sealing. But again, you don't fully know until you've opened it and you see what the blades are going to do. So there's still a small chance that it's not sealing. And that is how you tie a reed.